Alright, this is a little lanyap demo. A little something extra. Someone wanted to see how to do an ornament with a band of glass through it. And we were talking about how you could just draw a stringer on it. But I'd like to show you how I would go about doing it using an Encalmo technique where you join multiple bubbles together. In this case with the lines, I'm going to put a lip wrap around one side. So first we pull our points. You want to make sure they're straight. If they're not straight, it can lead to problems later on in getting things on center. So you heat the shoulder gently, soften it. Try not to pull. If anything, I push a little bit at first. I really try to do nothing. Because that's where it wants to go off center. That's where it's not straight. The handle itself has been pulled straight, and the tube itself is straight. It's kind of where it might not have been perfectly evenly hot or evenly thick there, and just didn't pull out straight. So if you can't pull a straight point, it doesn't matter, because the next step after learning how to pull points is learning how to straighten your points. And while I'm here, I might as well go to the other side. So I'm going to cut this bubble in half, and I'll join it back together. Some glass in the middle. And I'm sorry I didn't put my titanium filter on the camera. Okay, that feels much better. You just have to kind of feel that it's straight. You can't force it back on center. You just kind of have to nudge it or tell it where to go, or just trust that if you get it evenly hot and rotate nice and evenly, it'll find its center. If you've ever done pottery, it's a lot like centering a pot. You can't force it into place. You just kind of have to tell it where to go. So I heat the middle, and then on this brass V tool, I'm going to start carving in very gently, almost gliding across it as if it wasn't there. And then a little bit harder as it freezes up to define that stress point that we're creating. And once it's cooled, now it's got two halves with two open ends. I'm going to set one side aside. And I'm going to pull out my black, clean it, clean the tip off. You can also pull a stringer if you want a thinner black line. So I'm going to put black lip wraps on either side, and I'll put a little bit of a sparkly blue that I made in the middle. So these are kind of police color symbol ornament, the horizontal stripe. So I just want to round that out. I just reamed it out with my graphite reamer tools. Now I'm going to put a little black lip wrap on it. A number of ways to do this. I like to do it with a stringer or a thin rod. This is a piece of like 4 or 5 millimeter black that I got when I got an odd assortment of shapes and sizes. And you want to put it on there as evenly as possible, so that it will blow out evenly. The black's an especially stiff color. It'll give me an opportunity to maybe show you how to deal with that. Hopefully. I'm not making any promises here. So I kind of ream it on the inside, paddle it on the outside, and paddle it real gently, not trying to push it in too much. Kind of keep it straight. And then I want to melt this first one in pretty well. So I'm just letting the weight of the piece on the reamer do the work. Okay. And you can set this in your wood block to cool, or since I'm doing this as a demo for you guys, and I don't want it to crack on me, I'm going to put it in a kiln that's at 1050. But this one's been cooling, it's in the air, and I just reheat it. And I don't usually have to worry about it cracking too much. This is not too thick of a piece. This is 30 millimeter heavy wall. Just want these two sides to match in the end. They're going to be a similar thickness to begin with. The middle, I'll have to even out the thickness a little bit. And it should blow out nice and evenly. You want to pull it thin where they overlap. You don't want it to be a lot thicker where you started, because you left a little more glass there when you started and when you finished. Give it a good ream, good roll against the reamer from the inside, paddle it on the outside to make sure it's stuck down. So now I'm going to, before I even melt that in all the way, I'm going to take this piece of cobalt that I mixed with some sparkly color, some raw sparkly color. They make a few different ones like that called Disco Sparkle or Steel Wool. This was actually a green called Jackpot that I took probably an inch or two, so very little, nipped off a rod, and mixed it with an entire rod of cobalt blue. Want to kind of flatten that in, not to smush it so that it's so thick, just to kind of give it a little evenness so that my other side will go right to it. And it's just barely the size of this big reamer, I know that. If I can get that in there, then I know the two pieces will meet. I also don't want both ends open. I want to be able to blow through it. So there's a couple of ways to do that. I can put a cork in one end, although it would take a very small cork. I do have pretty small corks, and you can get smaller than this. I don't think this one will fit in that end. So I'm just going to seal off the end. I just melted it closed. And I want to make sure that these two pieces meet up. And they do. You get them both glowing. When you touch them together, you need to give it a good one last final turn in the flame. Touch, turning, making sure that they go together nicely. So then I want to melt all this in. This glass is not smooth like my two clear sections of tubing are. So I need to heat this up, melt it in, puff it out a little bit. It may even take blowing it out and then melting it in. When you melt it in, it kind of shrinks down and gathers up a little bit. So now we're having to keep two hands rotating in unison. One's doing most of the work. And a little puff. So they're being incorporated from multiple bubbles into one. This is called Encalmo, and it's part of montage, a German technique that means one from many. And again, this black is much stiffer than the clear around it. So oftentimes I'll use the pad or the paddle to chill the clear and try to keep it off the color so that the color stays a little bit hotter for a little bit longer. So that I can get one last little puff to puff them out evenly. Because this is the center of our ornament, it's going to be the widest point. It's got a little ways to go. So I really want it to be nice and even. Otherwise the clear will blow out first and it'll have like a waste. So once I have them started to be incorporated, I'm going to go and kind of melt one side in and blow it out to get it round. Continuing to heat the middle, and melt it in to incorporate a little bit more and blow it out wider as I go. Pushing ever so slightly, just gathering all this glass up. Back and forth, keeping it on center. Get both handles hot at the same time. That way one's always on center. So if you have to straighten the one that you're getting hot back out, you can. Okay, and now I'm going to flip it around and do the same thing to the other side. Slowly blowing that band out wider and wider. Can't rush it. You want it to blow out evenly. I have the weight in my left hand, my dominant hand, and I'm really just supporting it and helping to keep up with the turning with my other hand. Camera. And in a minute I'll remove one of my two handles, but I want to get this almost all the way around first. Again, paddling on the clear so that the color can stay a little bit warmer and has a chance to blow out even. It's almost round. And I don't have the hottest flame I can possibly have. I've got a nice soft pushy flame. That's round enough for me. For now, I'm going to give it one final puff, but I'd like to remove one of my two handles. This is just going to be a round ornament. I could incorporate the handle itself into the design, but I just needed it for support while I was working on the piece. It's the original point from one of the two halves. So I remove it, and it leaves a little bit of a nipple. You can puff that out if you don't want it. Sometimes it's good to have. Sometimes I will use that to attach a handle to later to remove it. I can grab it in claws and make my hook, but that can be a little, shaky. Just have a good pair of claws. And you want to be quick because those claws are sucking heat out of the glass and can cause it to crack. Okay, one final heat and one final puff, and that kind of blew it out nice and even. So the last step is to make our hook. And with a bubble like this, I don't want to trap air in it. I'm actually going to turn my handle here that I've been holding into the hook. So we want to pierce a hole with tungsten. This isn't the only way to do it, but this is how I found I like to do it. I do it different every year. I make a different ornament, and they always have different rules depending on what you're making. But get your, till it's glowing, get your tungsten hot till it's glowing. See how it stays hot for a minute when you come out of the flame? That's your working window. Because if you're in the flame, you're going to be fuming all over your piece. You can see the smoke. That's the tungsten vaporizing. It'll vaporize an ugly yellow onto your piece. So decide where you want it to go. I usually want it to go sort of right below where I think my hook is going to be. And I do flash it, but I don't get it hot enough that it's moving. And then I just touch down, and then with a little bit of patience and a twisting motion, in and out of the flame, just like this. More out of the flame than in the flame, but bobbing in the flame as you need heat or momentum. And it pierces a little hole, and you may or may not be able to see, but there's a little fuming on there too. So, because you'll get a little bit sometimes. So with the sharp oxidizing flame, and it burns it right off. If you don't use too sharp enough of a flame, it will actually melt into the piece and it will become kind of part of the color of the surface. It won't be nice and clear. It's in a little spot. So it's not intentional. And you want to melt it off with sharp oxidizing flame. Okay? And then you can grab it with a variety of pairs of grabbers. These are great. You can hold on to it for a minute, and that's fine. Or you can attach a handle to the bottom. And that's a nice, safe way to do it. Of course, you can get cracks if you take too long making your hook. You want to go back and reheat this to remove it carefully. Sometimes heating it a little further down the rod and then picking away at it until you have none left. Or work quickly. You can punty, or this is a full fuse. Just barely touch it. You don't want to smush it on there too much. And then I flip it around because now I'm holding the weight with this handle with my dominant hand. And I'm gonna gather this up. Just like the tip of a rod thickens up when you get it hot, so will hollow glass. And so in doing so, I'm going to use up the majority of my handle here. I like these because I have very little waste. You can even use straps for doing your lip wraps and your coils and whatnot. You only need a couple inches color, depending on how wide you want your band. And you may see that even though it was a pretty tall band that I coiled on there of the blue at first, it gets thinner as you blow it out wider. So it's thickening up, and it kind of goes into a little bit of an hourglass shape, and then it seals. It becomes solid. And you'll have a little sharp peak inside there, and you want to melt it till that's gone. They call that the dome of doom. And if it's a sharp point going into your bubble, going into your solid hook, it can lead to a crack. So gather up enough material for the length and the size that you want your hook. Come out of the flame. It's nice and thick, so you have plenty of time that you can very slowly pull. Pull it to the length and the thickness that you want. And then melt it off. And then to manually loop it over. Keep the whole thing hot. You can use your tweezers, or the paddle works great. But get it to where it's almost touching but not quite touching. And then kind of check to make sure it's straight, so that it will touch down straight. And then go and heat the two spots that are going to meet really well. And push it down. And then I like to go back over that spot where the two meet, if I think it needs it, and usually it does. Then I pull it back out. You push it and it's a little thick, and you pull it, and it kind of pulls back to a thin, nice even taper from the ornament. And that's the shepherd's hook. You can heat it more and round it out more. But that's how you make our black and blue ball. And then a lot of these ornaments I make, I'll just air cool, but this guy's got a lot going on. Multiple components that have been heated and blown out a lot, a couple times. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it away now. So I just removed my handle, leaving a little bit. So I just want to pick that away. I don't know if you'll be able to see from that angle. So get it hot, touch, and just pull. Kind of pulling a little bit at a time off. And you can leave glass there, but it all depends on what you want. I tell people, get 95% of it gone and don't worry about the rest. Okay, so I hope that was a good little lanyard demo. Something that maybe we didn't exactly do in the class. Encalmo, joining two bubbles together. And then put it in your kiln at 1050. Alright, thanks guys, I hope y'all enjoyed that.